You're tuned in to Beyond the Known. They were sprawled in the streets, their bones unbroken, their hands clenched, their city untouched by siege. No weapons, no signs of struggle, only silence. In the heart of ancient Pakistan, ruins suggest a city that ended in an instant. And for decades, whispers have followed the evidence. Extreme heat, vitrified stone, and a radioactive signature. Was Mohenjo-daro the site of a prehistoric nuclear disaster? To begin unraveling this mystery, let's start with the basics. Where and when was Mohenjo-daro, and who lived there?
Okay, so Mohenjo-daro is this really fascinating ancient site. It's located in the Indus Valley, which today that covers parts of modern Pakistan and northwestern India.
Right, part of the Indus Valley civilization, or Harappan culture, as it's sometimes called.
Exactly. A major Bronze Age civilization, really significant. It thrived for a long time, maybe 800 years or so, starting around 2700 BCE and then sort of fading after 1900 BCE.
And Mohenjo-daro itself fits within that timeline.
Yes. It looks like it was built around 2600 BCE, a major urban center. And like other cities in the area, it seems to have been abandoned sometime after that 1900 BCE mark. Its ruins were actually rediscovered, formally documented, back in 1922. Though Harappa, another big city from the same culture, was found even earlier.
And the name Mohenjo-daro, what does that actually mean?
It's a modern name from the Sindhi language. It's generally believed to mean Hill of the Dead, which is, quite evocative given the mystery surrounding its end.
A bit ominous.
It is. And it's just one of many, many settlements they found along the Indus River and the now dry Saraswati River. Gives you a sense of how widespread this civilization was.
So we're placing this civilization alongside giants like ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. What made Mohenjo-daro specifically so remarkable in terms of its design and technology?
Well, that's what continues to fascinate researchers, the urban planning. It's just astonishing for its time. This wasn't a city that grew messy and chaotic. It was laid out on a grid, a precise grid pattern. Streets intersecting at perfect right angles. Think about that for 4,500 years ago. That kind of planning is incredibly rare.
Suggests some serious central organization.
Definitely. And it was big, too, maybe 3 miles across, which is impressive for the Bronze Age. It was basically divided into 2 main parts. There was this elevated, fortified area called the Citadel to the west, and then a larger, lower city to the east where most people lived and worked.
The Citadel, was it just for defense or something more?
It served multiple purposes. It was about 400 yards long, 200 wide, built on this massive mud and brick platform, raised it maybe 50 feet above the lower city.
So defense, obviously, keeps you safe.
Yes, defense was key. But also, crucially, protection from floods. Being on the Indus, flooding would have been a constant threat. So this high platform was smart engineering, protecting the important parts of the city. It shows a really sophisticated grasp of both security and environmental challenges. The lower city, that was more residential, workshops, that kind of thing. This careful layout, it really puts Mohenjo-daro right up there with Egypt and Mesopotamia in terms of technological thinking.
And digging into the infrastructure itself, it sounds like daily life might have been surprisingly advanced, especially things like sanitation.
Oh, absolutely. The details are remarkable. They built with mud bricks, both fired and unfired. But the standardization is what's key. The bricks have consistent dimensions, consistent ratios right across the city.
Which points to?
Central planning again. Organized labor. Maybe even a kind of mass production. But the water management and sanitation, that's where they really shone. They had this complex drainage system. Homes had wells. Many had dedicated bathing areas. And there were soak pits for sewage. These systems were actually more advanced than what Rome had centuries later.
That's genuinely staggering. Systems better than Rome centuries earlier. And the Great Bath, that famous structure, what was its role?
The Great Bath is iconic. It's on a citadel, clearly a major public structure. It's this large rectangular pool, about 8 feet deep, 39 feet long, 23 wide, built meticulously.
Waterproofed, I imagine.
Very carefully. Layers of tightly fitted bricks sealed with a natural bitumen, like tar. Around it were small rooms, possibly changing rooms. One even had a well to supply water, and a large drain to empty it.
So was it just for bathing, or did it have other functions?
Almost certainly both. Hygiene, yes, but likely also central to religious rituals, purification ceremonies. You see echoes of that kind of ritual bathing in later South Asian traditions. The efficiency of it all, the drains, the clean water supply, it contributed to public health, a cleaner city. Quite remarkable for the time.
Beyond the plumbing, which is already impressive, what else tells us about their economy, their culture, their beliefs?
We get glimpses from the artifacts. For example, there was a huge granary building found on the citadel. Massive structure, 150 feet by 75 feet.
Suggesting centralized food storage. Taxes, maybe?
Exactly. It points to a structured economy, maybe collecting grain as taxes or for communal distribution. And they found standardized stone weights all over the city in careful increments. This strongly suggests merchants used these for trade, probably weighing grain or other goods, almost like an early form of standardized value.
And culturally, what artifacts give clues?
There are small stone sculptures. One famous one, about 7 inches tall, was thought to be a priest king, though that's debated now. It gives us an idea of dress, maybe status. Lots of small female figurines, too, often quite stylized. These suggest the worship of mother goddesses, fertility figures, which is common in early agricultural societies.
Any signs of art or personal adornment?
Yes, they were skilled craftspeople. Beautiful beads have been found everywhere, made from things like blue lapis lazuli, red carnelian, agate. Worn as necklaces, bracelets, rings, shows a taste for beauty, but also trade networks, since some of the materials weren't local.
And the seals. The Harappan seals are perhaps the most famous artifacts. What's their significance?
The seals are crucial and also deeply frustrating. They're small, usually carved from soft steatite stone, maybe an inch or so across, found in large numbers.
What do they depict?
A whole range of animals: buffalo, tigers, elephants, rhinos, even mythical-looking creatures like unicorns. Some show a figure seated in a yoga-like posture, which some scholars think might be an early form of the Hindu god Shiva. But again, that's interpretation.
And they have writing on them, don't they?
Yes, that's the key. They have inscriptions in the Indus script. And that script, well, it remains undeciphered. We can't read it.
So we have their words, but we don't know what they mean.
Precisely. The seals often have a loop on the back, so maybe worn as amulets or used to stamp clay seals on goods, like a signature or a brand. But without understanding the script, a huge part of their world, their beliefs, their history, their politics, told in their own words, is completely closed off to us. It means we're piecing their story together from ruins and objects alone, which is why Mohenjo-daro still holds so many secrets.
So now we understand the depth of Mohenjo-daro's ancient sophistication. But this isn't just a story of urban marvel. It's a story of a city that seemingly vanished. What clues did archaeologists uncover that hint at a sudden and mysterious end, igniting decades of wild speculation?
Right, the end of Mohenjo-daro is where things get really contentious and mysterious. When excavations began in the early 20th century, archaeologists started finding human skeletons scattered in different parts of the city, not in formal graves, but just out in the open, in buildings, on streets.
That sounds immediately suspicious.
It was. Places like Room 74 in House V, certain lanes, the DK area, they found groups of skeletons. And the early reports described them in very dramatic ways. Bodies found in twisted, intermingled positions, postures suggesting agony, or people thrown pell-mell into a pit. It painted a picture of sudden, violent death.
Like they were caught completely by surprise. A massacre.
That was the initial interpretation by some. For example, in that Room 74, they found 14 skeletons crammed together. The excavator, Hargreaves, called it a tragedy. In another area, 6 skeletons were found in a lane, covered by earth, but interestingly, not by collapsed building debris. Then there's the famous well-room tragedy. 2 skeletons found on stairs, as if they died trying to escape something.
These specific finds really fueled that catastrophe narrative, didn't they?
They became central evidence for those arguing for a sudden, violent end. The image was powerful. People cut down where they stood.
But was everyone on board with this interpretation right from the start? Or were there doubts among the original excavators?
There were definitely doubts, significant ones. While some, like Hargreaves, saw tragedy, the director of the whole excavation, Sir John Marshall, was much more cautious.
What was his take?
Marshall suggested these finds might not represent a single event. He thought they could be later burials, maybe from periods after the city's main occupation that just happened to cut into older layers, or even burials after the city was largely abandoned. He pointed out that finding bodies on a street surface didn't automatically mean massacre, especially if that street belonged to an earlier, already abandoned part of the city.
So scholarly debate right from the beginning.
Absolutely. But the more dramatic narrative of slaughtered Harappans caught mid-action really captured the imagination. Some interpretations, like one anthropologist looking at children's skeletons, went quite far, suggesting total extermination by hateful raiders. These ideas took root, especially outside mainstream archaeology.
Beyond the skeletons, which are already compelling, what other physical evidence from the site fueled these more extreme theories? Let's talk about the radiation claims.
Yes, the radiation. This is where the theories take a sharp turn into, well, the extraordinary. Fringe theories started claiming that radiation levels in the soil at Mohenjo-daro were unusually high.
High how? Like background radiation or something else?
The claim was that they were abnormally high, specifically similar to levels found after nuclear explosions. Some even asserted, though without any verifiable scientific backing, that specific radioactive isotopes were present. Isotopes supposedly only found at places like Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
That's a huge claim. Is there any actual scientific research confirming this?
No, there's no peer-reviewed scientific confirmation of these claims. Mainstream science attributes any background radiation to naturally occurring minerals, which is common everywhere. But these unsupported claims about bomb-specific isotopes and other high radiation spots in the region became key pieces of evidence for fringe theorists. The implication was clear: lingering signs of a nuclear-level event.
And then there's the vitrified stone. What exactly is that, and why is it significant here?
Vitrification is when a material, usually containing silica like sand or clay, gets heated so intensely that it melts and fuses into a glass-like substance. It loses its original structure.
And they found this at Mohenjo-daro.
There were reports from some observers, archaeologists included, of areas where bricks, pottery shards, things like that seemed melted or fused, having a bubbled or glassy appearance.
What kind of temperatures are needed for that?
Extremely high temperatures. To vitrify clay bricks, you'd need heat well over 1,500 degrees Celsius, maybe even higher. That's much hotter than a typical house fire or even most industrial processes of the time.
So, hard to explain through normal means back then.
That's the argument from the fringe perspective. They also point to finds of black lumps of glass in nearby desert regions, claiming these are actually melted pottery, further evidence of an incredibly intense, widespread heat event.
So, putting it all together, the scattered bodies suggesting sudden death, the claims of unusual radiation, the evidence of extreme heat through vitrification, how did fringe theorists weave this into the ancient nuclear war idea?
They essentially connected the dots, drawing direct lines to modern nuclear warfare. The seemingly instantaneous deaths, the bodies caught mid-action, the intense heat needed for vitrification, the alleged radiation, they argued these are all hallmarks of a nuclear blast. Researchers outside the mainstream, like David Davenport, emphasized patterns they saw in the ruins, claiming they resemble blast waves, finding melted materials they felt couldn't be explained conventionally. They took these disparate, often questionable pieces of evidence and constructed this narrative. Mohenjo-daro was destroyed by an ancient, high-tech catastrophe, likely nuclear, mirroring the destruction scene in the 20th century.
These findings stirred up a lot of questions: strange deaths, signs of intense heat, even radiation. It's no wonder some started asking, could this have been the site of an ancient nuclear war? Let's explore those theories next.
Absolutely. And a big part of that theory involves reinterpreting ancient texts, particularly Indian epics, as actual historical records of advanced technology and warfare.
Which texts are usually cited?
The Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita come up frequently. Sections like the Book of Drona describe incredibly powerful weapons called astra. The descriptions are quite vivid. They talk about weapons that could wipe out entire armies, make warriors and chariots and elephants get carried away like dry leaves. The scale of destruction described is immense.
And some descriptions sound eerily like modern superweapons, don't they?
That's exactly what proponents argue. The Mahabharata, for example, describes a weapon as bright as 10,000 suns. It talks about people being reduced to ash, food becoming contaminated. There's a famous passage about a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe, creating an incandescent column of smoke and fire, brighter than thousands of suns, wiping out entire groups of people, making the world reel in fever, water boil.
It's hard not to see the parallels with nuclear descriptions.
For believers in this theory, these aren't just metaphors. They see them as fragmented eyewitness accounts of events resembling nuclear detonations. The intense light, the heat, the fallout, the mass destruction.
And this ties into the idea of Vimanas as well, doesn't it? These supposed ancient flying machines.
Yes, the Vimanas are absolutely central. Ancient texts like the Rig Veda mention divine chariots, Ratha. But the Ramayana goes further, describing the Pushpaka Vimana used by the demon king Ravana. It's described as a flying palace capable of incredible speed and distances. Some descriptions paint them as circular, double-decked craft with portholes and a dome. Very much like, modern UFO descriptions. They supposedly moved like the wind and made a melodious sound.
Are these just mythological descriptions, or are there texts that claim to be more technical?
Proponents point to a text called the Vimana Shastra, supposedly an ancient manual on aeronautics. It allegedly describes Vimanas as machines that travel by its own force from place to place or globe to globe. It's claimed to list specific parts, even metals used in construction, some unknown today, and details secrets for piloting them.
Secrets like what?
Things that sound quite advanced, if true, like Gudha for making the Vimana invisible using atmospheric effects, Drisha to create blinding reflections, Stabdok to paralyze enemies with fumes, Chapla to disrupt enemy craft with waves, and even Parashabdagrahaka to listen in from afar. Advanced surveillance and defense capabilities.
So these weren't just transport. They're depicted as potential weapons platforms or advanced reconnaissance craft.
Precisely. This feeds the narrative that these weren't myths, but accounts of real high-tech conflicts, divine wars fought with advanced technology. Some even try to link events like the catastrophic Kurukshetra War and the Mahabharata to actual demographic data, like a supposed genetic bottleneck around 7500 BCE, suggesting a real devastating ancient war.
It's a very elaborate picture. Who are the main figures pushing these kinds of interpretations?
Well, David Davenport, who we mentioned, is often cited for his site interpretations linking ruins to these texts. Eric von Däniken is perhaps the most famous popularizer, with Chariots of the Guides, laying groundwork for ancient astronaut theories. Then you have figures prominent on shows like Ancient Aliens, Giorgio Tsoukalos, David Childress, Stephen Greer, Nick Pope. They bring these ideas to a huge audience. Others like Zacharias Sitchin interpreting Sumerian texts and earlier writers exploring unexplained phenomena also contribute to this broad genre of alternative history.
So the core argument is that Mohenjo-daro's destruction fits this pattern described in ancient texts, possibly caused by these advanced prehistoric groups or even extraterrestrials.
That's the crux of it. They take the ambiguous findings at Mohenjo-daro, the skeletons, the vitrification claims, the radiation stories, and argue they match the descriptions of superweapons in the epics. They posit that these texts are a form of technological memory of a lost past, maybe involving advanced human civilizations or ET intervention. This narrative gets applied globally, linking Mohenjo-daro to other unexplained sites or destruction myths like Sodom and Gomorrah. Even natural formations like Libyan desert glass sometimes get pulled in as proof, despite clear geological explanations.
And the implication stretches beyond just one city's destruction.
Yes, often that leads to grander theories about cycles of civilization, suggesting a super-advanced race existed long ago, and that famous ancient monuments are just remnants of their lost knowledge rather than achievements of known ancient peoples. It creates a whole alternative timeline for human history.
How are these ideas generally treated, both within the communities that promote them and by mainstream science?
Within those communities, there's often strong support, a kind of echo chamber, reinforcing these interpretations by selecting evidence that fits. Critics label this pseudo-archaeology or pseudo-history, arguing it mixes fact with speculation and fiction. Proponents sometimes frame themselves as independent thinkers battling a rigid establishment, claiming big archaeology suppresses their work, although often they lack formal training or rigorous methods. Mainstream science and archaeology, however, overwhelmingly dismiss these theories. They're seen as highly speculative, based on misinterpreting data, ignoring context, and lacking verifiable evidence. Critics also point out issues like cherry-picking data, logical fallacies, and sometimes problematic undertones in these narratives.
The stories are captivating weapons brighter than the sun, lost technology. But how do these ideas hold up against the scientific evidence? Let's see what modern archaeology has to say.
Well, when we look closely at the scientific analysis, the picture becomes much clearer and quite different from the nuclear war scenario. Let's start with the skeletons again. Modern archaeological techniques, especially stratigraphy studying the layers of soil and debris, show that those scattered skeletons weren't all from the same time.
Meaning?
They were found in different layers representing different periods in the city's history, potentially spanning centuries. So it wasn't one single moment of destruction that killed them all simultaneously.
So not a snapshot of a single catastrophe.
Exactly. And remember, even early excavators like Sir John Marshall were skeptical of the massacre idea. His view, supported by later research, is that many were likely later burials that disturbed earlier levels or represented isolated incidents, maybe small conflicts or individual tragedies, not a citywide wipeout. Take those 6 skeletons in the lane. They weren't covered by rubble from a massive destruction event, just loose earth. And the lane itself dated to an earlier phase of the city. The well-ruined tragedy remains unexplained, but 2 skeletons don't equal a citywide massacre. Bottom line. There's just no solid archaeological evidence for a sudden, violent mass extermination event at Mohenjo-daro.
Okay, what about the radiation claims? Surely high radiation would be hard evidence.
If it were true, yes. But the scientific consensus is clear. Any radiation detected at Mohenjo-daro is consistent with naturally occurring radioactive minerals present in the soil and rocks in that region and many other regions globally. It's just background radiation.
And the specific claims about isotopes only found at bomb sites.
Those claims are completely unsubstantiated by credible, peer-reviewed scientific research. Experts are very clear on this. A nuclear explosion, even thousands of years ago, leaves behind specific, undeniable radioactive isotopes, fission products. These have long half-lives and are easily detectable with modern equipment. In fact, modern steel is slightly contaminated from 20th century nuclear tests, which is why sensitive scientific instruments often use steel produced before the atomic age. The complete absence of these specific fission products at Mohenjo-daro is actually powerful evidence against the nuclear war theory. If it had happened, the signature would be there. It isn't.
All right, so no nuclear blast, but what about the vitrified materials? That requires intense heat. How does science explain that without superweapons?
There are several plausible explanations that don't involve anything exotic. One strong possibility is intense, accidental fires in specific locations. Think about pottery kilns. The Harappans were master potters. Their kilns could reach very high temperatures. If a kiln malfunctioned, or if a large store of fuel caught fire in a confined building, the heat could absolutely be intense enough to melt or vitrify the surface of nearby bricks or pottery. We see this at other archaeological sites with evidence of major fires.
Could natural events cause it?
Yes. A direct lightning strike packs incredible energy and heat into a very small area. It easily melts sand into glass, fulgurites, and could certainly affect brick surfaces. There are also rare geological events, like underground peat fires in certain conditions, that can generate extreme heat. And finally, sometimes what looks like vitrification is actually the result of long-term weathering.
Weathering? How so?
Thousands of years of exposure to sun, rain, changing temperatures, salts in the soil, all these can cause the surface of bricks to break down, crumble, or sometimes harden and develop a crust that might, to an untrained eye, look a bit like melting or glazing. The brick composition itself also plays a role. So there are several mundane explanations for these vitrified finds.
So if it wasn't a sudden catastrophe, what did happen? Why was this great city abandoned? What does mainstream science point to?
The scientific consensus points to a gradual decline over centuries, driven by a combination of environmental pressures and societal changes. It wasn't one single event, but a slow unraveling.
What kind of environmental pressures?
A major factor seems to have been the river. The Indus is a massive dynamic river system. Evidence suggests it shifted its course over time, possibly due to natural processes or even tectonic activity in the region. If the river moved away from the city or caused catastrophic floods, it would have devastated their agriculture, their trade routes, basically undermining the city's entire foundation.
And climate change. We hear about that affecting many ancient cultures.
Definitely a key factor here, too. Recent research, like the study from Woods Hole using ocean sediment cores, points to significant climate shifts around 1900 BCE. It looks like the monsoon patterns changed. Winter monsoons might have become stronger or more erratic, while the crucial summer monsoons, vital for their crops, weakened. This would have made large-scale agriculture, needed to support a big city, increasingly difficult and unreliable.
Tectonic activity, too. Earthquakes.
Yes, the region is geologically active. There's evidence for major tectonic shifts around that period. While we don't see clear signs of cities being flattened by earthquakes, the quakes could have triggered those river course changes and caused destructive floods. Flood damage is seen at several Harappan sites. And even today, Mohenjo-daro's ruins are threatened by extreme weather linked to climate change.
So it sounds like a slow squeeze rather than a sudden blow, a gradual de-urbanization.
Exactly. It wasn't an overnight collapse. Over centuries, starting around 1900 BCE, we see signs of decline. The extensive trade network seems to break down. The use of standardized weights fades. Baked brick quality declines. Characteristic crafts like seal carving largely stop. People didn't just vanish. They likely moved away gradually, probably eastward towards the Ganges Valley, where environmental conditions might have been more stable. It was a slow process of abandonment. Navy resource depletion played a role too from centuries of intensive farming. By 1300 BCE, only scattered remnants of the culture remained.
And that change in brick standardization you mentioned earlier, how does that fit into this picture of decline?
That shift away from the highly precise 4.2.1 brick ratio to less uniform sizes after 1800 BCE likely reflects this gradual breakdown. It could mean weakening central authority, unable to enforce standards, or skilled artisans moving away, or just a general decline in the complex organization needed for that level of standardization. It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes about the slow unraveling of their sophisticated urban system.
So, to sum up the scientific perspective, how does it view the ancient nuclear war theory overall?
Mainstream science and archaeology view it as unfounded speculation. It relies on misinterpreting evidence, ignoring context, and overlooking well-understood natural and historical processes. There's no credible evidence for extreme radiation. The skeletons don't indicate a single massacre. The vitrification has plausible conventional explanations, and the gradual decline fits the environmental and archaeological data far better. The theory requires ignoring vast amounts of counter-evidence and lacks any positive proof for the extraordinary claims it makes. It remains firmly in the realm of pseudo-archaeology.
While science offers logical reasons for Mohenjo-daro's decline, the unusual evidence and ancient stories still leave us wondering, could there be a hidden chapter in this city's past waiting to be uncovered?
That's it for this journey beyond the known. If the unknown calls to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow. There's so much more waiting to be discovered. And if you want even deeper access, consider unlocking vault access for curated wonders, or try the secret passage for select hidden treasures. Both come with loyalty badges, exclusive audiobooks, and early Beyond the Known episodes.